Black man rejected and humiliated at elevator. They never knew he was their savior. In a world where prejudice still lingers, hidden in plain sight, some moments shine a harsh light on the truths we often ignore. This is the story of William, a man whose strength wasn't defined by the way he was treated, but by the way he chose to respond. Imagine stepping into a hospital, a place meant to heal wounds, save lives, and offer compassion, only to be met with rejection for something as immutable as the color of your skin. William, calm and composed, walked through the hospital lobby with quiet determination. Dressed neatly in a pressed shirt and holding a folder close to his chest, he moved with purpose. His steps were steady, his head held high, a picture of dignity in the face of the subtle challenges he'd grown all too accustomed to. He noticed the occasional glance, eyes flicking toward him, then quickly away, as though even looking too long might be an acknowledgement. He noticed how people shifted in their seats, adjusted their bags, or moved to the side without a word. But he'd learned long ago to keep walking, to let the weight of their judgments roll off his back. He refused to let them define him. William approached the elevator, the steel doors just beginning to slide shut. Picking up his pace, he reached out, his hand stopping the motion, and stepped forward. His voice was calm, polite, yet firm. "Excuse me, mind if I join?" Inside, a group of people stood shoulder to shoulder, 3 men and a woman. Their chatter halted abruptly, smiles freezing on their faces as they turned to look at him. The atmosphere shifted, growing tense. Their eyes darted to one another, silent communication passing between them. One of the men, standing nearest to the control panel, hesitated for a split second. His hand hovered over the buttons before he leaned forward and pressed the close door button. The doors slid shut with a soft click, cutting William off. For a moment there was silence. Then, just before the doors closed completely, a voice, faint but deliberate, drifted out. Not for him. Maybe the service elevator. William stood there, frozen in place. His hand, still hovering in mid-air, dropped slowly to his side. His face remained calm, unreadable, betraying none of the emotions stirring within. But the words hung heavy in the air, sharp and cutting, their weight sinking deep. He didn't react. He didn't argue or push back. He simply adjusted the folder he carried, a small, reflexive motion, and stepped away from the elevator. The hum of the hospital surrounded him as he blended back into the crowd, his pace steady, his composure unbroken. Inside the elevator, the group relaxed. The tension dissolved as quickly as it had appeared. They resumed their conversation, their brief discomfort fading into the background. For them, it was nothing more than a fleeting moment, a joke they'd likely forget by the end of the day. But for William, the sting lingered. Not because it was new, but because it was all too familiar. It wasn't the first time he'd been judged like this, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. The remarks, the laughter, the silent dismissal. It was a pattern he'd seen repeated throughout his life, a constant reminder of the prejudice that lived just beneath the surface. They thought they knew him. They thought they could sum him up in a glance, decide who he was based on nothing more than the color of his skin. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was the purpose behind his visit to the hospital. They couldn't see the kindness and courage that defined him, the life-changing decision he'd made without hesitation. He made his way to the waiting area and sat down, carefully placing the folder on his lap. The noise of the hospital swirled around him, but it was distant, almost muted. He opened the folder and scanned its contents. The words "kidney transplant donor" bolded at the top of the page. As his eyes moved over the text, his mind drifted back to the elevator doors closing in his face, to the words that followed, to the way the group laughed without care. Across the room, the same group now stood near a coffee station, talking and laughing loudly. Their voices carried just enough for William to hear snippets of their conversation. "Did you see his face?" one of the men said, shaking his head with a chuckle. "I mean, come on. What was he thinking?" William's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He didn't approach them, didn't demand an apology. Instead, he sat still, his fingers brushing over the edge of the folder in his lap. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he knew there was more at stake than his pride. They saw only his skin, judged him in an instant, and moved on as though it meant nothing. They had no idea who he was or why he was there. They had no idea of the choice he was about to make, a choice that would impact more lives than they could ever imagine. But they would find out soon enough. And when they did, it would be too late to take back their actions. William wasn't at the hospital for himself. He wasn't there because he needed care or because someone had insisted he come. He was there by choice, a quiet decision he'd made after weeks of reflection. Sitting in the waiting room, he felt the weight of the folder in his hands, the bold letters, "Kidney transplant donor" on the cover, staring back at him. Those words represented something so much larger than himself, something that couldn't be measured by the glances or whispers of strangers. A nurse approached, her steps soft but purposeful. She carried a clipboard, her smile kind and professional. "Mr. Williams, we're ready for you now," she said, her voice gentle. William looked up, nodding as he stood. He straightened his shirt, adjusting his posture as though bracing himself for what was to come. The folder remained in his hands for a moment longer before he handed it over to the nurse. "Right this way," she said, leading him down a long, sterile hallway. The white walls and bright fluorescent lights seemed to stretch endlessly, but William's focus was ahead. He wasn't nervous. His resolve had been set long before he walked into the hospital. As they passed a series of closed doors, the nurse turned to him. "You're making an incredible sacrifice today," she said, her tone filled with admiration. "Not everyone would be willing to do this, especially for someone they've never met." William's lips curved into a faint smile, but he didn't respond. It wasn't that he didn't appreciate her words. It was just that the idea of being a hero had never crossed his mind. He didn't see himself that way. What he was doing wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about humanity, about making a difference in a world that often overlooked those who needed help the most. When they reached the pre-op room, the nurse handed him a clipboard. "Just a few final forms to sign," she explained. William glanced at the papers, his pen moving steadily as he filled in the required blanks and signed his name. Each stroke of the pen felt heavy, not because he doubted his decision, but because he understood its gravity. Once he handed the forms back, the nurse gave him a reassuring smile and guided him to the preparation area. Meanwhile, in another part of the hospital, a young man named Ryan lay on a hospital bed. He was pale, his face drawn from weeks of illness. His body, once vibrant and full of energy, had grown weak. Ryan's family surrounded him, their faces etched with worry. Ryan looked up at the doctor standing by his bedside. His voice was weak but sincere. "I don't know who's donating their kidney," he said, his words slow and deliberate. "But please, if you get the chance, tell them thank you. Tell them they're saving my life." The doctor nodded with a smile, his tone gentle. Your donor understands the importance of what they're doing. Rest assured, they're doing this because they want to make a difference. As the surgery began, William lay on the operating table under the bright lights. The room was cold, the hum of machines steady and constant. The medical team moved with precision, their focus entirely on the procedure. William drifted into unconsciousness as the anesthesia took hold, his last thoughts not of himself, but of the unknown person who would wake up tomorrow with a new chance at life. Hours later, William stirred in the recovery room. His body ached, the after effects of the surgery making every movement feel heavy. A nurse was by his side, adjusting the IV and checking his vitals. "You did great," she said softly. "The surgery was a success. You should be proud." William nodded slightly, his voice too weak to respond. But inside, he felt a quiet sense of relief. He had done what he came to do, and that was enough. A few rooms away, Ryan was waking up as well. His family hovered around him, their relief palpable. The doctor smiled warmly as he addressed them. The transplant went smoothly. Ryan's body is already responding well to the new kidney. He's going to make a full recovery. Tears of joy filled the room as Ryan's family hugged each other, their gratitude overflowing. They didn't know who the donor was, but in that moment, it didn't matter. All that mattered was that Ryan had been given another chance at life. As William was discharged later that day, he walked slowly through the hospital halls. His movements were deliberate, each step reminding him of the sacrifice he had made. As he approached the exit, he passed a familiar group, the people from the elevator. They were gathered outside Ryan's room, their expressions filled with relief and joy. One of them, a man with salt and pepper hair, wiped tears from his eyes as he turned to the others. "He's going to be okay," the man said, his voice trembling. "We almost lost him, but he's going to be okay." William paused, watching them from a distance. They were so consumed by their relief that they didn't notice him standing there. He recognized their faces immediately, the same faces that had turned him away, that had judged him, that had laughed as the elevator doors closed in his face. The irony wasn't lost on him. These were the people he had saved, the family whose lives had been forever changed because of his decision. They didn't know, and perhaps they never would. But as William stood there, he felt no anger, no bitterness. Instead, there was only a quiet sense of purpose. Adjusting his jacket, William turned and walked toward the exit. The group's laughter and joy echoed faintly behind him, but he didn't look back. They had no idea that the man they had rejected, the man they had humiliated, was the one who had given them their miracle. And for William, that was enough. William walked down the hospital corridor slowly, his steps measured as he adjusted to the lingering soreness from the surgery. Every step reminded him of the sacrifice he'd just made, but it wasn't the physical pain that weighed on him now. It was the moment he had just witnessed. The group from the elevator gathered outside a hospital room, tears of joy and relief on their faces. They were celebrating the success of the transplant surgery. The irony was sharp. These were the same people who had humiliated him just hours before. From a distance, he watched them. The woman wiped her eyes with a tissue, her face lighting up as she spoke. "I can't believe it. We almost lost him, but he's going to make it." The man next to her nodded, his hand resting on her shoulder. "He's lucky. Whoever donated, they're a hero." William's expression remained calm, unreadable. He knew they didn't recognize him yet. Their attention was consumed by the relief of knowing their loved one would survive. But he recognized them. The judgment in their eyes from earlier, the whispered remark about the service elevator, the way they had closed the door in his face. He took another step closer. This time, the sound of his shoes against the floor made one of them glance in his direction. Their eyes met, and the man's face froze. Recognition dawned slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. The woman turned to follow his gaze, her face paling as she too realized who he was. It's you," the man muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The rest of the group turned, their earlier joy now tempered by a heavy silence. The awkward shuffling, the nervous glances. It was clear they didn't know what to say. The memory of the elevator encounter hung in the air between them like a shadow. William stopped a few feet away, his face calm but firm. "I heard your family member is doing better," he said evenly. "That's good to hear." The woman opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The man nearest to the door finally managed to stammer, We didn't know it was you. If we'd known." William's lips pressed together, his gaze unwavering. "You didn't know," he said. "But you didn't stop to know either, did you? You didn't see me as a person. You saw my skin and decided who I was without a second thought." The weight of his words hit them like a wave. One of the younger men in the group looked down, unable to meet William's eyes. The woman stepped forward hesitantly, her voice trembling. "We're sorry," she said, her tone barely above a whisper. "We were wrong." William nodded slightly, acknowledging her apology, but not letting them off the hook. "Sorry isn't for me," he said. "It's for the people you'll judge next. It's for every person you've dismissed, every stranger you've written off because they don't look like you. That's where your apology belongs." The group stood silent, shame etched into their faces. The man closest to the door spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. "We owe you everything," he said. "You saved him. You saved our family." William's gaze softened, but his tone remained steady. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "What you owe is a change in how you see the world. The next time you meet someone, take a moment to see the person standing in front of you. Not their skin, not your assumptions. The person." Before anyone could respond, a weak voice called out from inside the room. "Wait, can I meet him? Please." The group turned, startled, as the voice continued. It was Ryan, the young man who had just received William's kidney. Pale, but smiling, he looked toward the door, his gratitude palpable. William hesitated for a moment, then stepped into the room. Ryan's eyes widened slightly as he took in the man before him. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't know how to even... Thank you doesn't feel like enough. You gave me my life back." William's expression softened further. "You don't need to thank me," he said simply. "Just take care of yourself." Ryan nodded, tears forming in his eyes. "I will. I promise." As William turned to leave, he glanced back at the group standing by the door. They were silent now, their faces a mix of gratitude and regret. William didn't need to say anything more. His actions had already spoken louder than any words ever could. Walking out of the hospital, the sun felt warmer than it had when he entered. William's steps were slow but steady, his mind calm despite the weight of the day's events. Behind him, the group remained in the corridor, their conversation hushed, their expressions reflective. They would never forget the man who had saved someone they loved, nor the lesson he had given them about judgment and humanity. This story isn't just about William. It's about all of us. It's about the choices we make every day, the silent judgments we pass, and the small actions that either build bridges or deepen divides. Racism doesn't always come in loud, overt acts. It often hides in subtle moments, in an elevator door that closes too quickly, in a whispered remark, or in an assumption made without thought. It thrives in silence, in ignorance, and in the belief that it's not my problem. But the truth is, it is our problem. Every single one of us plays a part in shaping the world we live in. Racism isn't an abstract concept. It's a reality lived by millions, a pain felt in everyday encounters, and a weight carried by those who are seen as other. It's in the moments when someone like William is dismissed, humiliated, or reduced to a stereotype. And it's in the silence of those who stand by, who watch but do nothing. William's story reminds us of something powerful, the capacity for kindness to break through prejudice. Despite the way he was treated, William chose not to retaliate with anger or bitterness. He chose grace. He chose humanity. And in doing so, he forced the people who judged him to confront their own biases. He showed them, and us, that kindness is a strength, not a weakness. It has the power to transform hearts, to shift perspectives, and to create change. But kindness alone isn't enough. Awareness is where it begins, and action is where it grows. Let this story be more than just a moment of reflection. Let it be a spark that ignites a movement within each of us. Ask yourself, when was the last time I stopped to truly see someone for who they are, beyond appearances? When was the last time I challenged my own assumptions or stood up against prejudice, no matter how small? It's not enough to say, I'm not racist. We must actively work to dismantle the structures and mindsets that perpetuate discrimination. It starts with listening more, with seeking to understand the experiences of others, and with recognizing that everyone's story matters. It means choosing to speak up when we witness injustice, even when it's uncomfortable. And it means creating spaces, at home, at work, in our communities, where everyone is seen, valued, and respected. Together, we can create a world where stories like William's are no longer necessary. A world where no one is judged by the color of their skin, but by the depth of their character and the kindness of their heart. Imagine a world where diversity is celebrated, where compassion is second nature, and where humanity transcends every barrier we've created. It's not just a dream, it's a goal we can achieve if we work together. William's story is a call to action, a challenge to each of us to be better. Not tomorrow, not someday, but today. Start small, with a conversation, with an apology, with a moment of self-reflection. Small actions lead to big changes, and every step forward brings us closer to a more just and inclusive world. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes or touched your heart, don't let it end here. Share it. Start a conversation with your friends, your family, your co-workers. Use this moment as a chance to educate and inspire others. And if you believe in the power of kindness and the fight for equality, be part of the change. Let's create a community of understanding, a movement of empathy, and a world where everyone belongs. And if you want to hear more stories that challenge, inspire, and bring us closer together, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your voice matters, your actions matter, and together we can make a difference. Let's be better. Let's do better. And let's build a future we can all be proud of.